All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us for this discussion of the Laurel House. This is the second of two meetings we've been hosting, and I want to start by introducing myself. I'm Allison Bartle. I'm with the Property Development Division. I'm joined by Brian Lee with the Property Development Division and Rebecca Eman, as well as a number of art staff. The intention of today's meeting is to continue the conversation that we started in December of last year and March of this year. About the Artist in Residency program and the development of Laurel House. So the order of events will consist first of a review of the Artist in Residency program that has been developed over the last several months, and that's going to be led by the Arts Division and our city consultants, Kimberly Meyer and Sarah DeLayden. And then the bulk of our program will be focused and led by Paige and Turnbull, which is the architect that was selected by the city in April of this year. And they have been developing a schematic design based on the community needs that were first developed during our initial outreach period last year. So for the webinar, a few ground rules. Please keep your mics muted during the presentation. You can see the agenda here, and then we're going to be holding for questions and comments at the end. This meeting is being recorded, and it will be posted to the project website, which is listed here, and I can also drop it in the chat. For questions at the end, please use the raise hand feature, and it's on the toolbar down below. You'll see a reactions button and you can select raise hand. If that's complicated, it doesn't work for you, you can also drop it into the chat or just state that you want to speak. And I'll be looking at videos. If you just want to try and raise your hand, I'm welcome to circle through folks and get everyone heard from at the end. With that, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to engaging, and I'm going to pass it over to Kimberly.
Thank you, Allison. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to give a super quick overview of what brought us to this point so far. West Hollywood is organizing an artist in residency program at this Laurel House site. It exists as two different things. One will be artists actually living in the top floor of the existing house. And they will be coming from all over and be of various disciplines, and will live there for possibly a year, possibly even longer. The other residency will be for local residents who live in West Hollywood and would like to have some studio space. And so there are some garages in the back. There'll be 3 that are dedicated to studio space and 1 potentially like more of a communal space. And those will be awarded to West Hollywood residents also for like a relatively longish period of time, at least probably a year or 2 years to be determined. And we're just excited about the possibilities of the interlacing of these 2 residency programs, so that people who are local and who are being able to work in the day studios every day also have a chance to interact with the artists who are coming from elsewhere. And then of course there'll be a public programming component to it as well. We've really reached out to the neighbors and heard from everybody that they would like the opportunity in a kind of a small scale way to interact with the residents who are going to be, sort of funneling through. And so that's essentially how the basic structure of how it's going to work. And we've taken what we've learned from all of our working with the community up until now and fed that information to the architects, and so they can kind of try to understand and work that into their design, which they've done a beautiful job of. So we're excited to hear more from them today. So thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name's John Lesak, and I am a partner with Paige and Turnbull, and our firm specializes in design and planning in and around historic places, a little bit of a unique specialty. I'm joined today by James Mallory, our colleague of mine, as well as our design partners X10, Scott and Monique will be participating. And then our landscape architect, Lisa Gimme. And we also have our mechanical engineer who's not speaking, but could answer some questions today. So we're doing something a little bit differently today. We're going to present based on the physical boards that we used last night in a live presentation. We've kind of cut them up digitally and are going to walk through these 4 kind of key or 4 areas of the project. I'm going to start with kind of the key factors that are influencing the project. Then Lisa's going to talk about the site and landscape proposals. James is going to talk about really the public spaces. So the artist galleries and the chauffeur's cottage, which is going to serve as an archive for the city. And then Scott and Monique are going to talk about the actual residences and studios part of the project. And these are the 4 boards that we used last night. I'm sorry. We have 3 factors that are really affecting how we're approaching the design. And the first is the arts programming and community input that we heard before. And here's some word clouds from a meeting in December 2022. We're also thinking carefully about the historic nature of the property. And I'll go into that in a minute. And also about sustainability and how we can upgrade the property sustainably. Since we are historic folks, we think in terms of generations and how the present might use a historic place and how the future might use a historic place. So we do talk quite a bit about sustainability in our work. So, so Kimberly did a good job talking about the previous work from the arts programming and community outreach. So I'm going to move on to how we think about the Laurel House and Park as a historic place. So in order for something to be considered historic, it really needs 3 core things. It needs to have a historic context, meaning it needs to fit into the broad patterns of history. It needs to be significant within that historic context. And it also needs to have historic integrity, which means it needs to have enough kind of physical attributes in order to tell the story of why it is significant within this historic context. So when we look at that for the Laurel House, we start with the historic context. The historic context is broken into themes and places and time periods. And specific to the property, there's themes in and around the development of Hollywood and West Hollywood. That involves the Linnick family. And it also involves a really interesting shift from large single family, almost estate properties to multifamily residences. And that really is the core, one of the core things that makes the Laurel House itself historic. So obviously the place is West Hollywood. And the time period that we're looking at isn't necessarily the original construction. It's what we call the period of significance goes from 1924 to 1941. And that's the time period when the Linnick family owned the property and really shifted it from a single family residence to a multifamily residence. So when we look at what it's significance for, the Laurel House is an important example of the transformation of single family residence into multifamily housing, which frequently occurred in residential development in the 1930s and 40s in West Hollywood. And we're also looking at the design. So it's an exemplary example of American colonial revival style. And it was originally built in that style, but it was eclectic. There were some craftsman elements, but when it got remodeled, I'd say they tightened up the style, the colonial revival style. So by the time we hit 1941, it was very much the kind of dictionary definition of American colonial revival. And then there's 7 pieces of historic integrity that we look at. So we look at materials, we look at design, We look at feeling, which is a little more nebulous, but does it have this feeling of kind of a multi-family project from the early 20th century in the colonial revival style? Location, sometimes historic buildings move, this one hasn't. And then the association, how do we tie what we see to these to the historic significance? And we also look at workmanship and we look at setting. So the setting has changed a little bit over time, but it's still a historic resource. So these are some photographs to get you thinking about the Laurel House. So this is when it was a single family residence in 1924. And again, you can see it's, you can see a lot of what's there today, but it did have these kind of porches and extensions that were removed as it shifted into the multifamily residence. It was a fourplex, 2 units downstairs, 2 units upstairs. This just shows the shift in the floor plan from the kind of estate to the 4 units. On the left, so these for historic documentation, specialized photographs taken around 2000, so they're over 20 years old now. But showing the front entrance, and you can see the broken pediment above the door that really is part of the colonial revival. We're showing there was the driveway is as part of it, but this is the rear kind of southwest corner of the house, and or northwest corner of the house. There was what we're calling a portico share, the extension from the building that was added at a later date. But the stairs were part of the reconfiguration of the building. So we're going to put back the stairs, but we're not going to put back the portico share. This is the rear of the house, and it's a pretty functional area. And then you can see the stair to the left of the picture on the left, which was what we were looking at in the previous photograph. And then there's a series of garages and servants' quarters. So it was a period of time when the building was built where people had servants and chauffeurs, and they lived on the property to support the residents. And over time, as they added more people, they added more garages. This is the main house. These are the 2 front rooms that face the street. So the first floor living room on the left and the second floor living room on the right. One of the things that's very interesting about the property is that as people lived in these units, they tailored them more and more to their tastes. So you get an eclectic feel to it, which we think is appropriate to the artist and residence program that's coming. And then this is the chauffeur's cottage. There's a front porch that faces the park. And then on the right, they had a really lovely, there is a really lovely paneled living room that James will talk about a little more as we program the chauffeur's cottage for the future. So, thinking about the history, we really want to tie the historic characteristics, the significance to the physical environment, and how we think about the project and strategizing for the project. So we think about, what do we preserve? So we want to preserve character defining features, which are the materials and architectural components which establish the visual character of the property. And we also want to preserve significant spaces and spatial relationships. So that could be room layouts, and that could be a sequence of how you move through rooms and space when you use the building or site. And we'll talk about that right now. So I'm sorry, for some reason the site plan is a little bit faint, but I can see it on my screen. But when we think about the site features and contributing elements, we have all of the buildings. So we have the main house, we have the chauffeur's cottage, and we have the garage. And the garage has really three parts to it. It has a northerly garage, a southerly garage, and servants' quarters that are integrated into it. And then we have, a terraced front lawn. It's a little bit hard to see now because it's there's so much growth on the site now. But if you ever remember the postcards and the historic photographs, you could really see terracing. So there's a walk from the street up to a very formal porch. And then you go in through kind of the big door with a broken pediment into a foyer, and then there's a grand staircase, and all the units spin off of that. So that's that spatial relationships that I was talking about. And then there's other site features. There's a brick planter around the two cedar trees in the front, and there's driveways that have always characterized the property. And then similarly, within the house, I already talked about the central entrance, which you can see in the stair, which you can see a photograph of on the right. But there's a number of details. There's some nice elements of select bathrooms and kitchens. There's some built-ins like on the far left. There's moldings and trims and light fixtures that are there. They're not in every room, they're not in every space, but they're in a considerable amount of them. And we're going to try to retain them as we move forward. And then transitioning to sustainability, and again, we think in terms of generations, so we know the history up to this point. So what's the new chapter and what's the future uses? And when we move a building forward, we want to make sure that we're doing it in kind of the most efficient, most sustainable way that we can. Excuse me. And typically we kind of have a four-part strategy. So the first step in this is really to reduce the demand, both for electricity and water. We look at the next thing is to buy the most efficient technology that we can afford. The third thing is to provide controllability so that people or automated systems can turn off heat and light and other utilities that are going on while nobody's in the room, and people can adjust things based on their personal preferences so they feel more comfortable. And then the last thing is to provide on-site generation of electricity so that we can balance out and not have to take so much off the grid. So here's a list of features that we worked with Travis to work out. But when we're looking at reducing demand, as we work on the property, we're going to insulate the walls. If we open them up, we're going to insulate the attic. There's a basement. We're going to insulate the basement against the first floor. We're going to look to improvements of the windows. Many of the windows we're going to rehabilitate and repair and leave in place, but there are some times where we'll need to replace them. And we'll look to more efficient windows that match what's there. We also are going to try to maximize daylighting and associated views. We're looking at strategic insertion of skylights, and on the garages, replacing opaque garage doors with light and bright door systems that open all the way. And we're also looking at some water harvesting strategies, including a laundry to landscape system, and maybe even some rainwater collection. The image on the right is a demonstration project that we're working on for water harvesting in this valley, or in the San Gabriel Valley. And then there's a list of efficient systems that we want to use, and system and controls that provide variability. And if you have questions on that, you can ask later, but in the interest of time, I will keep going. Oh, sorry, I had a little hiccup in my system here. Can you all still hear me?
Yeah, maybe stop share and then reboot it and we can pass it off to
Yeah, that's a
X10.
little strange. So I'm gonna be passing it off to Lisa. If you want to give an introduction, I'll get this thing working again.
Thanks, John. Lisa, you want to give a quick intro and we can get it back up for you?
Okay. All right, great. We're the landscape architects working with the team, and my colleague Jeff Graham is in on the call today. Oh, good.
Yeah,
Success. Great.
it fixed itself right away, so that was good.
Very, very good. Okay. I think our next image is a close-up of the plan for the project. So, okay. So the park is an interesting place because it's multifunctional. It's of course a community destination, and the southern portion of the park has historically been used as a dog-friendly park. That's going to be retained as we go forward. And what we're going to be doing is developing that area is currently somewhat under-improved, and then also adding features that are related to the artist's residency program. So starting out at the street, there's an existing parkway. We're proposing to infill some of the trees that have been lost over the years. And then the most important thing in the front is that we are retaining the formal entry to the historic Laurel House. And we're going to improve the ADA circulation to the house. So just if you draw a rectangle where the existing ramp is located. Right now, people come in at the northern part of the site and they use that curving walkway to arrive at the driveway. They cross the driveway and then they go up on a ramp that actually cuts the formal stair into the house in half. So just that rectangle should go halfway down through the path. So it's not very attractive, and it's a little bit, it's not in keeping with the character, the colonial character that John alluded to in his presentation. So we're rerouting that pathway so that it arcs across, comes gently up, and then you're going to be able to walk directly onto the porch, and then we can restore the integrity of that original stair. And if we could go to the next image, which is the elevation view of the house. Okay. So you can see here what that intervention is going to look like. It's very modest. We have centered it on that window. So it'll just be an incision in the existing railing for the porch. And you can see here the two character-defining deodar cedar trees and the ring of masonry that surrounds them. All of that is going to be protected in place. And then in terms of the landscape that we are proposing, what we'd like to do is simplify what's out there right now so that the focus is really returned to the house. and people can see more of the house, and the landscape is playing really a supporting role in the presentation of the building. Okay, let's go back to the plan. So let's look at the dog-friendly area first. Right now, that area is just basically bare dirt, and there's a couple trees. It's pretty barren and doesn't contain very many facilities that welcome the public to use it. And so our proposal is to bring that up. We're proposing this staggered row of trees so that there's more shade in that area. The first portion of the rectangle has benches and some movable furniture. And then the second rectangle, we thought it would be interesting to consider having some picnic tables so that people can actually use that area for gatherings that include food. And then finally, to the north of the dog-friendly area, there's a small seating area, which is accessed via the existing staircase. So it's just a quiet area where people can sit around that the existing deodar cedar tree. So I'd like to point out that what's being retained in terms of the existing landscape. All of the existing hardscape is being kept. And the project, I think it's important to note, the project fits exactly on the footprint of the existing buildings, with the exception of a small storage shed that's being added on the southern side of the artist studios, the day studios. And we can show you the reason for that in a minute. Now, returning to the artist area. Jeff, could you outline where the fence is that kind of defines where the artist area is? There's a fence, of course, that is all along the frontage on Laurel, and that allows, the controls who can go in and out of the entire property. We're proposing to keep a second fence that Jeff just highlighted. And here, let's talk about what's on the top part of the plan right now. There's a very kind of haphazard little picnic area. We're proposing to expand that and have some raised vegetable beds. That'll be for the people that, the artists in residence. Then there's an area where we have bike parking and scooter parking. And then we have new accessible access that will lead to the chauffeur's cottage that's being converted into the archive. Okay, then we're coming to one of the most important spaces, which is a new space. So behind the existing Laurel House and between the Laurel House and the new artist studios is a flexible space that can be used for performances that can be scheduled throughout the year. And if we could go to the sunshade studies now. Let's go back to the plan view. Okay, so you're seeing here the Laurel House is on the right. The artist studios are on the left. Artist studios have some kind of flexible area that's for them to use if they want to kind of spill out of the studio. Then there's this space that we have to use for the performances. I think we have 84 seats shown in this current configuration, and that's a portable stage. So those are the elements that would be potentially stored in the shed that we showed you earlier. And let's go to the next. So here you can see there was concern about what's the space going to be like. And so this 3D program that we're using, you build a little model and then you can put in the time of day and the day of the year. And so what this is depicting is what the shade's going to be like at 4 p.m. On the summer solstice. So that's the longest and one of the hotter days of the year. And I think you can see that the space feels like it's kind of nicely shaded and will be a pleasant place for people to use. So let's go back to the plan just one more time. So when we select our materials for the project, what we'll be looking to do is to build on the beautiful assets that the site has, the incredible cedar trees. What we'll be doing is looking to simplify what's out there right now, because it's really over the years just kind of been an accretion of a lot of different materials, no editing. And so what we'll be doing is something that's simple, that's easy to maintain, that is drought tolerant and resilient, you know, for the coming years that we all expect to get hotter. So I think that pretty much wraps up our presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm James Mallory. I'm a historic architect here at Page and Turnbull, and I'm going to talk about the public spaces. It's basically the first level of the main house and the archive, which is in what we're calling, or what has been called the chauffeur's cottage. These are spaces that will have some public access, and so we group these together. Next, we're going to be talking about live workspaces. This is schematic design, which means that it's the first of 3 design phases, and it's schematic. We're still working things out, but I think it's starting to gel. And so we want to share it and get some feedback. Our approach when working on these buildings, as people have been talking about before, is to strike a balance between the preservation of the character defining features and allowing for new functions and new uses in this house and a new life. And so we've gone through different iterations and vetted it a few times. And this is where we are right now. Move forward. So this is the first floor of the main house. And I'm basically going to walk you through to tell you about the current plan. As Lisa was talking about, the podium on the right side or the east side is made accessible. And then the main entrance is restored in the same place, and it's largely unaltered. From the main floor, you go into the main foyer, and that's the historic foyer with the staircase. That's the image number B on the right. And this is largely a preserved space. Really, the only modification is that we are creating a punched opening to continue the foyer to the left, and there's going to be an inner foyer. And so it has a strong circulation axis, and then we're repeating the same axis on the second floor. From the inner foyer, you are able to access a large kitchen and dining room that I'll talk about in just a minute. That's in pink. And then also there's the main restrooms for the first floor. And then also I would point out that from the inner foyer, you can exit outside and go directly to the courtyard or the performance space that Lisa was just talking about. And also from the inner foyer, there's a lift or small elevator, which is going to connect all of the floors so that it will be entirely accessible. Now, when you come through the front door back to the main foyer, on your left and your right, there are the large living rooms, original living rooms, and that's picture E. Those spaces will be the large galleries Also optional performance spaces. But that's kind of at the heart and where the public can have access. And actually, one of the comments we asked was, how would those spaces be used by the neighbors in the community? There's also a number of smaller rooms that would be converted into gallery space. On the south side, there's a kitchen dining room, which there's actually not much integrity or much fabric left of it. That would be gallery space. And then on the north side, there's a small vestibule, which is, the picture of it is picture C. It's a really charming little space with a dome in the ceiling. That will be part of the gallery space. Just working around quickly on the floor, the restrooms, the large restrooms would be new, but there is a smaller restroom on the south side. That is a historic restroom, and we would be restoring that to its original condition. And then, like I mentioned, there's the kitchen dining room on the northeast side. That is a large space that would be primarily the kitchen for the residents who are upstairs. But it could also be used for functions, more public functions in the front of the house. And then finally, I would point out there is a green room, which is green, which is for performers to get ready for their performances. And that is, it's located in a way that they would have access to the gallery performance spaces inside the house. And then they could also easily go outside to the courtyard for performances in that area. And next picture. So this is just a quick section showing you the dining kitchen area on the lower left, and then a more public art, or it could be a exhibit space or performance space on the lower right. And then the second floor is what our partners from X10 are going to talk about next, where the residents would be living. Okay, the chauffeur's cottage on the west side of the property will be converted into City of West Hollywood archives. And basically, we can see the entrance of it, category or image letter A. The floor plan of the archive is essentially a more public space and a private space. The more public space is sort of the orange color, and that the main room, which was the original living room, is B. And I think John showed a little piece of that earlier. That's the wood paneling, and that would be restored, and that would become the main reading room of the archive. And then just to the north of that is a smaller dining room, which is D. And so we would be doing a restoration of the original wood cabinetry in there. Then to create the functional archive itself, the room, which is number 2102, which is actually currently a kitchen, that would be converted into an office and workroom. We would be maintaining most of the original cabinetry, and that's where the processing would happen for the archives. And there's also a small storage room in the back, which is picture C. That would be a storage space, temporary storage. Rounding it out would be a new accessible restroom. Currently, what is there has been modified many times and is not accessible. And then the archives themselves. And as we continue in design, we will get more specific as to what is required, but it would be climate controlled and appropriate for the contents. Forward. Quick section of the archives, just showing the archives on the left and the more public space in the right. And so from there, I'm going to turn it over to X10, our design partners, Monica Heckelfinger, Scott Utterstrom, Sophia Nowina Gunova. And they'll be talking about the upper floor and the galleries at the garage.
Thank you, James. Like James was just mentioned, I'm joined by Scott Utterstrom, principal at Exton Architecture, Sophia Konopka, project architect, and myself, president of Exton Architecture. Our specialty really is residential architecture. So we, with the guidance of Page and Turnbull, looked at the second floor in how we can transform what used to be a single family home, later on apartments, and best layout 4 apartments, one of which would be handicap accessible. So Sophia will be speaking, getting into the details of that, and then the last part of the puzzle will be talked about by Scott Otterstrom, which are the 4 art studios that are in what used to be the garages. And because the building is historic, we took our cues really from the building with guidance of Page and Turnbull to make sure that we are basically utilizing the beautiful floor plan in the best possible way that is sensitive to the historic context, and but updating it to be very user-friendly for the residents to come. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to Sophia, who will be talking about the second floor plan.
You can skip to the next slide so we can see the plan. Okay, so this is the second floor plan of the main residence. As has been mentioned by everyone, we are trying to strike a balance between maintaining and updating where necessary. So we started off really, our design was informed by the existing spatial organization of the second floor. We have in orange, so there are 4 apartments at all 4 corners. In orange are the primary spaces that really anchor each apartment. The 2 main living rooms here face the front, and those are the 2 living rooms, work-live spaces for those 2 apartments facing the front of the property. And then here we have in orange again, the 2 main spaces for the back apartments. As Monica mentioned, we have updated the top right apartment here so that it is accessible. We tried to pick an apartment with a large space so that it was accessible for wheelchairs. We also added a large bathroom so that it was also accessible. In terms of the other bathrooms, the second floor has 2 existing bathrooms that we are maintaining. We are going to maintain most of the tiles and clean those up. We are creating a 3rd bathroom here for this front unit, just to make sure that all units have a bathroom and that there's equality between all the units. So apart from these updates, we are also updating a few other things in here. We are adding kitchenettes. The main kitchen, as James had mentioned, is on the 1st level, and that's going to be the communal kitchen. So these are just smaller moments for coffee and tea. We are also adding more closet space, and we're also adding a shared laundry room here in the center off of the main core. The elevator, as you can see, is here in the back attached to the core. And in terms of maintaining the best physical examples of character defining features, we have some built-ins, which you can see in image A here in the top right corner. These built-ins are in the top right unit. There's a few other built-ins and cabinetry throughout the second floor that we are keeping. An example of that is image D at the bottom of the page here. And I've also mentioned that we'll be preserving the bathrooms and the tiles and the vanities. I think that pretty much concludes the second floor. As you can see, we're really trying to maintain as much character defining features as we can while still creating spaces where artists can both live and work comfortably with lovely spaces that have been updated. And I will pass on to Scott so that he can present the garage studios.
Hi, everyone. So I'll be speaking about the artist studios located towards the rear of the property. I think in some ways this was kind of one of the more challenging parts of the project, just because there were several structures involved here that all kind of occurred in different phases over time. So you'll see some of the images here on the right-hand side, but the first structure was the servants' quarters here highlighted, which was probably the oldest example and one of the nicest examples of craftsmanship for these structures. We also had the chauffeur's cottage to the north of that, that's located here, which James talked about. And then later added on were the 4 garages when the property transitioned into a multifamily property, and a covered shed portion connecting the servants' quarters to the chauffeur's cottage. So our strategy here was really to kind of improve the condition and return to the original condition in some of these cases, and remove the roof between the servants' quarters and the chauffeur's cottage, so that we could restore the exterior siding on those 2 elements and really emphasize those as 2 separate structures. And we had adding 2 artist studios in the servants' quarters, but really trying to keep that in its original form as much as possible with the minimal amount of intervention. The 4 garages to the south, we are combining into 2 artist studios, and due to the kind of restricted height in those units, we've kind of opted to create a new roof, lift it up, giving more space to those units, and really creating kind of the most intervention there, along with a new accessible bathroom here that would be used by the artists and during public and for some of the performance events that take place. And I think really for that, just in terms of our design language, well, actually, just before I skip to that, we're keeping, I think we've added new openings here, opening up out onto the garden and providing a lot of natural light to the artist studios. And maybe if you can go ahead and skip to the next slide. Yeah, this shows a section and kind of east elevation. So design-wise, we really wanted to kind of complement the existing structure, but also recede into the background and really highlight these older elements. So you've got the new artist studios here on the left-hand side in the elevation, and the bathroom kind of receded back and tucked back between the servants' quarters and chauffeur's cottage. And we used the inspiration of some of the terracotta, the kind of reddish orange colored pathways on the property as our inspiration. The section shows one of the new artist studios, really opening up as much as possible towards the garden, getting lots of natural light, adding skylights. And I think this also is a portion of the project where it allowed the most opportunity to introduce some sustainable features. So we were able to kind of increase the overhangs, providing more shading for those units, operable windows for some more passive strategies for cross ventilation, motorized skylight serving as a kind of heat chimney, and really operable devices using a lot of user control. I think we'll also just be looking at kind of high standards for insulation, looking at photovoltaic panels on the roof, and I think potentially some kind of water capture and water treatment options here for this. And I think the other thing that you can see, yeah, sorry, just to jump back there to that section real quick, is we really saw this space in front of these studios as kind of an extension of the studio, opening out onto the exterior as additional workspace for the artist, but also maybe a location that provided more interaction during events where the community could interact with them as well. And I think that mostly wraps that up.
Great. John, do you want to stop sharing real quick? And if folks have questions, you can put them in the chat. Also, you can use the raise hand feature, or just come off if there are questions. While folks are thinking, I can briefly answer one. We see the comment from MC about the gardens. The ones we're showing on the plans are really a kitchen, a living kitchen garden for the existing residents. We are exploring in the city of West Hollywood other places to put community gardens. We know there is a high need. And we are aware of it. So we appreciate your comment, and we are actively looking for more gardening space in the city of West Hollywood. Yep, Thomas, go ahead. I see your hand there. I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it looks wonderful. I love the space as I go to it now. I'm an actor, so would there be any opportunity for like a small rehearsal space for something?
Yeah, Kimberly or Sarah, do you want to jump in here? I think they've been working extensively on the programming for the space, so I think that's kind of what you're discussing. But I know that we've essentially designed the spaces at this point in time to be open to kind of further interpretation. So I'll let Kimberly or Sarah jump in with a kind of summary of the previous work.
Yeah, Thomas, thanks for your comment. I think it's a great one. One of the things that we're trying to figure out and working really broadly is what kinds of artists would need space in West Hollywood, and actually an actor, a performer would clearly, I think, fit that category. So we haven't defined exactly what the criteria is for the artists yet, and it may be, but I think I will say that we feel like it should be pretty broad. And certainly rehearsal space or practice space or like all that kind of stuff is definitely a need, and I don't know why we wouldn't be able to combine that in the kinds of things that we're thinking about.
And as far as having a performance there, how does this work, since it's, the property, is it something you would charge us? How does that work?
I mean, none of the financing is figured out yet. We've just been working at this very, very basic conceptual mode, and are basically trying to be as open as possible to all the possibilities. And so, so these are the kinds of things that this kind of input is helpful, because it helps the programming part of it get figured out. So I would definitely encourage you to keep to talk to us and write to us and let us know, everybody here, what you think would be helpful as neighbors.
Thank you. I guess I have one other question, because
Go ahead, Tom.
again, it may be too far ahead. So if there were to be a performance there and you filled 83 spaces, where would people park?
Yeah, so we're working, likely we'll be using City Line, and we're working on the parking plan. Again, we're developing a program, but there won't be on-site parking as of now, but we will be working with the residents and with, when there are community events, to take impact off of the neighborhood. And I think this segues into Andrew's question. So I just want to provide an overview of where we are. So, for the past year, we were developing the artist in residency program, who would use this space. Then that has informed us going out to RFP for early schematic designs, the dream stage. So we took what we learned from the community last year, and this is the first time the community has seen an iteration of a plan. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to be reporting back, once we have a cost estimate, to the Public Facilities Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, and the Arts Commission. And then we're going to take that input and go to City Council, likely in January of next year. And we're going to present them with what we've come up with so far. And then if they want to move forward with further design development, they need to allocate more funds, hopefully to Page and Turnbull, to develop the plan so that we can get to construction documents. And then once we have construction documents, we can go out to bid, get a contractor and do this work. And at the same time, be developing the full artist in residency program. So, we've been telling folks, the earliest this would ever kind of come to fruition is 2026. So we're still very early in the plans. And again, this is the first time the community has just seen a design iteration, since we did our initial outreach about the artist in residency program. So Andrew, I hope that answers your question. Or sorry, Anthony, I hope that answers your question. A few more questions. How does access happen on the property from day to day? Does the public have access from sunrise to sunset? So we'll still have access to the park like we do now. And we are working, I think you saw in the plans, we also want to make sure that the artists that are working there and their tools are secure. So there's an existing fence there that will continue to be kind of the delineating line, more or less. But we're going to work on making that fencing a bit more attractive. And obviously, when there are open campus events, we can open that up and allow the public to have more access to the house. But we want to balance the security of the residents that are living there with the public. But the park is still intended to be a park like it is today. And then, so you can continue to submit comments to me. My contact information, I can put it in the chat. And then we also, at the top, I put in the project website, and there's where you'll be able to review this video and the project plans, which we'll be posting. You'll also be able to see when the next community events are, and that's how to keep track of this project. And then if you have RSVP'd, we have your email and we can keep you on our contact list going forward. I think we got to all the questions in the chat. If there's any others.
I had one more question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Andrew Solomon, and I'm on the Public Facilities Commission. At our next PFC meeting, it's our special annual tour of various facilities around the city. And one of those stops on our tour, it's on October 14th, and the public is invited. And one of those stops, we are visiting this space, Laurel Park specifically, not just Laurel House, the whole park. But I wonder if there's a way that maybe some of these renderings, if they were like physical boards that you had yesterday at your Plummer Park meeting, if some of those could be available on site whenever we're there, both like as commissioners, but hopefully there's people from the public that are also joining on this tour and can see,
I'm putting the boards in the windows tomorrow, actually. So the boards will be available in the windows, and we're going to leave them up there until we have updated plans. And so I will coordinate too, Andrew, with Helen and the public facilities about that tour. And I wasn't sure, I know you guys were in the park, but we can also see if, you can walk the house, but I'll connect with Helen.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Allison, can I just offer a quick final thought before
Sure.
we go? I just want to say, for those of you who are direct neighbors, but also neighbors in the sense of just being invested in the city of West Hollywood, it's just really important for us to have this feedback from you. We're definitely trying to design this, both the structure physically, how it's thought about, but also any of the social aspects that come with the artist in residency program. We really want you to be able to imagine yourself into this place. So again, part of why we're doing the local artist studios, part of why we're doing the public programming space inside, and of course, options with the park space too. So just want to say that again, this is really meant to include you, even though it is also about having visiting artists present. Thanks, Allison.
Great. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up now. And hopefully we look forward to hearing from you in the future and seeing you at additional public meetings. So thanks for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.